Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spark Talks. Today, we're diving into advertising, chatbots, and the artificial intelligence that drives them. We have two guests who are experts on this subject. First up is Dan Gailey, CEO of Radbots, which provides targeted ad content for bots.
Hey, I'm Dan.
You can reach him on Twitter at Radbots and at DPG. Nice score.
Thanks.
Also from Radbots is Nathan Ross, COO of the same company, who can be reached at Nathan T. Ross.
Hi, nice to be here, and thanks for inviting us.
Yeah. From Spark's side, we have Toby Trevarthen, Chief Narrative Officer at Spark.
Hello, all.
He's on Twitter at TobinW. And we also have Shane Jordan, VP of Strategic Insights at Spark,
Hola, amigos.
who is on Twitter at Shane_Jordan. I'm Vanessa Zucker, Spark's marketing manager and your host. Make sure to jump in on the conversation with us by tweeting at SparkPR. So guys, what is your company, Radbots, all about?
Radbots ultimately came out of the idea to solve monetization for bots. And we took a step towards figuring out what that actually means and how to get developers paid. Right now, our first product is a way to integrate advertising, context-aware, intent-aware advertising into chatbots.
So since you're the expert on chatbots, can you please explain a brief history of chatbots? What were they originally used for, and how is that changing?
So chatbots kind of is just an extension of bots, and chatbots can be thought of in two ways, where you have your text-based chatbots and your voice-based chatbots. And so ultimately, previously, if you think about bots the way they existed kind of in the 90s on something like IRC, there's not a lot of difference today at a very rudimentary level, right? So you have kind of a decision tree bot where you engage with it, interact with it, and it's kind of like some call and response, right? Then we're starting to see this emergence of tech that does, I guess, more fluid natural language understanding, right? Where it can serve as a reservoir of history of your engagement with it and kind of can start building a narrative around, your intent, ultimately.
Toby, that sounds like your call, narrative.
We like that keyword.
Did any of you guys use early chatbots back in the day?
Yeah, I'm dating myself, but back in the old days of AOL, we had a product called AIM and a product called ICQ. I don't know if you would actually classify those as chatbots, but we literally did a program with Gap, where we literally had shopping bots, holiday bots that we created. And I believe it was the first time I know in our internal history that we ever sold a sponsorship. It was $1 million deal where Gap sponsored our holiday shopping bot. And it was for him, her, kids. So they literally could go in and they had all their SKUs baked into the bot. And you literally could do e-commerce on the bot. So you could pick the scarf and buy it because it would take you right to Gap.
That's fantastic for AIM.
It was a cool idea, and that was 2004.
Yeah, I think even before that, I remember AOL, I think, was my first ISP, actually. And we had bots on there that kind of served files to one another so you could message something, or technically it was mailing something. And it created an interface like chatbots are today, where you could serve up some files or, coordinate information essentially in some repository, right? So that was kind of a text or chatbot early experience.
This is Shane, just chiming in here. I guess my earliest experience that might be somewhat in this realm was working with Meebo. I think this was back in about 2007. They were a great team, and we were doing a lot of advertising integrations into that protocol, which is very interesting. Probably touched on it for the most part around then, and I guess my latest kind of interactions with bots and chats would just be Slack, and I got a shout out to Giphy for making our Slack conversation super fun.
Always topical, always relevant.
All right, so what problem is Radbots trying to solve in the advertising and chatbot space?
I think that's really kind of giving a new face to advertising and leveraging advertising in a new way that makes sense for this new interface. We're trying to create targeted experiences, ultimately. So when somebody engages with the chatbot, they're looking at something that's a very intimate experience, right? So having something where traditional ads have been kind of fighting for attention, some call to action there, like on a web page or otherwise, you're kind of in the action already. So anything that you serve up needs to be a part of that experience and can't really take people outside of that experience. So we look at it as an extension of good experiences right now. And that's kind of, the company that we're building and the vision that we have.
One of the biggest problems with advertising today is it's pulling you away from like the actual product that the person is interested in or what they're actually doing, where we're trying to build onto that conversation and add to that narrative where it continues and, makes a better experience overall for the user. We don't want to pull them away. We want to continue.
Right. It sounds like, and just working in kind of, let's say like media technology and working with social platforms and ad technologies. I mean, they're all striving to try to be as personal and relevant as possible to things. I'm just imagining, getting served up ads on my Facebook page, right? And they're going to try to see what I'm talking about and put ads toward that. But again, it really just operates kind of like what's within their network and makes what's sense for them at that particular time. But it's interesting how you talk about chatbots being intimate. And I do agree that there's a certain level of intimacy that happens within a chat conversation as something that's displayed on a web page for you, even though it's like what I see on my personal, Facebook page or something like that. So I think it's interesting to view in those terms. And do you think that being that there's a heightened level of intimacy, but also a heightened level of relevancy, that, it is a great kind of enhancement to that conversation?
Oh, absolutely. We now have, I guess, new levels of dimensionality when it comes to understanding a person, right? Because we're in the conversation itself, we're not guessing anymore. So we know exactly what people want and what they're doing. And that's kind of almost unparalleled up to this point. It's really just about affecting that experience in a very positive way.
Right. I think, and obviously the elephant in the room is privacy. Right?
Right.
So a lot of people are going to say, you're looking at my conversation. It's like, well, if we didn't look at your conversation, we really wouldn't be able to serve you that contextual, of an ad, and it's super relevant for you. So I think I've had a lot of conversations, and a lot of people net out on that. I don't mind sacrificing my quote unquote privacy if I'm actually going to get something that's super targeted and relevant for my needs today.
Right.
Right. So I think that's the trade-off that people are starting to understand. Do you agree with that?
The biggest problem with privacy with like ads is it's not necessarily that they care that you have their information. It's that they care when it's just in a random place. Like there's certain information that you see on a Facebook ad and you're like, how did they know this? Like where did they grab?
That's a great
listening
point.
to my conversation while I was talking to my friend? Were they looking at my email? Like where's that coming from? Whereas if we have a persona of the person and they know they're in the conversation and it directly matches with what they're doing, then that just feels very, very in touch.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And there is a lot of those instances. And I think that does feed into some of those kind of privacy fears that people have is like, listen, I know I was having a conversation about Starbucks, with my friend, and all I had was my phone in my pocket. I pop open my laptop and I have that Starbucks ad for my local Starbucks like right there in front of me, and I know that had to come from, because I don't ever really talk about that.
Right.
And it's a little unnerving at times, but to your point, if it's something that's really part of the conversation that I'm having at that specific time, then I'm not wondering where Big Brother was behind the curtain.
Right. And ultimately, I like to look at every boom in technology as kind of being prefaced with some change, ultimately, right? So we had in the 90s, 2000s, trust. And I think a big one, can people trust to put in their credit card? And now we're having a big one with privacy. And I don't think the argument is what can we do if we have information, but how can that information be used for or against us? I think there needs to be some kind of, at least legislation in place that enables a world where people are more open to enable a better experience.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a great segue into one of the next questions we have here about trust. We talk about end user experiences and kind of having that trust with bots, but then also, how about brands? Do you guys want to touch a little bit on brands coming around to accept bots or trust bots as an effective strategy for them? I mean, we touched a little bit before we started on the podcast today about how mobile was, was this really going to be something that was going to take off? Was social media something going to take off? Is this type of advertising going to take off? And lo and behold, those things are all, mainstays of today's marketing stack?
So the interesting thing with brands, when we talk about brands, people initially go, oh, their entire goal is to sell me something. They just want to sell product. But that's not really good brand strategy. What a good brand does, they want to build relationships and grow those relationships. And so with like a service like Radbots, having a way to, continue that intimate conversation and really, connect with the user on a deeper level, that's the whole purpose of any new media. So when you have sites where, they're just blasting the user, they're killing that relationship. And if you have sites where they're really, building a positive experience, they're growing that experience. And so it's really important for that relationship to flourish.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see the rate of adoption for chatbots for brands a bit in the past, current, and where do you see that going in the future?
For brands, it's really seen as a new way to interface with their customers. And just as the web was in the 90s and mobile was in the 2000s, chatbots are really just a brand new interface. So we see a lot of brands who are really racing to discover how to engage their clients on a whole new level, how to engage their customers with their brands on a whole new level.
Another thing that's also really interesting, you think about like the 90s to 2000s to now, is with each one of these new technologies or fads that pops in, there's more information that the brands actually know about their users. So if you think about like 90s, 2000 web, a lot of brands were just guessing, who their users were. They might know, their location, and then they learned, like some more like facts about like age and interests, and now they can, know like even very intimate details that again like fill that conversation and makes it just more relevant and better experience for the user. So as technology keeps on going forward, and that's the great thing about chatbots, there's even more information that a brand can know and learn about a user, and the same thing, the user can learn more about the brand they're talking to.
Toby, this sounds like it is just calling to you. How can this be a tool that brands use to build their company's narrative?
I'm very interested in where this is going, for the mere sake of, as we talked about before we got on air here, that I'm generally working with a company that's in transition to try to either reinvent itself or reposition itself in the market. So typically when we construct a new narrative for a company, we're in the game of trying to shift the conversation. And from a narrative perspective, you generally have the initiator and or the responder. And most brands today tend to be responders. They hijack the news. They try to inject themselves. And a brand is not in a dialogue. It's a one-way communication. It's me pushing my brand on you. In narrative, it's a two-way dialogue where it's a conversation back and forth. So that's where my curiosity lies with chatbots, is how do we take that two-way dialogue and create a new way of subtly injecting, my brand into that conversation.
So that's actually the biggest difference between a lot of advertising and what, again, chatbots can offer is that two-way dialogue. One of the trends that's become popular over the last few years that is an example of advertising I kind of dislike, sometimes despise, is product placement inside like television or movies, which is now moved into product placement inside of music videos.
Yeah, overt.
Like exactly.
Yeah.
It's just, it feels like it's off. It doesn't feel right. It's directly sent to you. There's no conversation back. Whereas as a user, if you're able to interact with that brand on a deeper level, then the brand can understand that this is a really smart way to do it. We have data that says this is working, that people are actually appreciating this.
I'm kind of curious if there's some parallel where brands jumped on Twitter, like, JetBlue, and they started to use that as a customer relation type of scenario. Do you see parallels between like that, the way that evolved versus where chatbots can go?
Absolutely. Again, it's like a very quick response. One of the things that chatbots offers is immediate response, no matter what. So instead of having to wait 5 minutes or 20 minutes, you can get a response immediately. And then at some point, certain chatbots even loop in a real person. So it really feeds that conversation. It's interesting. I remember I had an issue with Airbnb. Speaking of Twitter, I had an issue with Airbnb a few years ago. And I was on the phone with them, and I was on a 50-minute wait for a phone call. So then I posted one Twitter comment, and I got a phone call back in 30 seconds from a different phone number from Airbnb and solved the problem. So brands are definitely wanting to use this as a great customer service or a great way to connect with their users and to not have negative press. So chatbots let that happen immediately, lets them control it more.
One I guess curiosity question. Google really owned search from intent, right? So it was all about intention. It seems like Twitter's owning stream of conscience. So it's just a constant stream, endless stream. Where does chatbots fit in that paradigm?
Intimacy and relationship building. That's where chat has really thrived personally. Chatbots, I think, are just a way for us to say there's some intelligence on the other end, right? Whether it's human or autonomous. I think that's kind of, just human nature to want to engage in that interface. It's intrinsic in us. It seems like a natural, I guess, shift in the order of technology.
That's great. And a couple interesting things came out of that conversation, and Nathan, you were saying how, you try to give a phone call and, they put you on hold, obviously, and you're bottom of the list. You make something public, you put something on Twitter, which I think is a lot of like the go-to for customer service, and all of brands have been launching customer service specific Twitter handles, right? And so you got a quick response because it was out in the public. They would love to probably have you, like the phone thing isn't the best experience for you because it kind of takes away your affinity for that brand because you're in a state of struggle, right? It's not really helping you. Being able to resort to a chatbot is going to get you that immediate response you're looking for, and it's great for the brand because it keeps it out of the public sphere. Right? So I think that it's kind of a win-win for brands on a customer service level when interacting with a bot on that level. So I think it's a pretty good observation.
That's a great point.
All right, so what will advertising look like in the next few years, and what will chatbots look like?
Wow, those are big questions. I'll go ahead and tackle, at least try to answer this. So advertising for me ultimately looks like recommendations. They're a part of the conversation, they're a part of what I'm searching for, and they're really an extension of what I need. Ads for me signal, product development, an interest in a company to provide and allocate a resource. Ultimately, it's resource allocation. Advertising looks less like traditional advertising has in the past and more like a conversation that you have with a friend, and a conversation that helps move along your intent. So as far as how do chatbots, how are they going to change? I think that there's a huge shift coming up in whether or not we can tell there's a human on the other end. There's going to be a huge shift in what that bot knows about us and what it can infer from how we engage with it. And ultimately, I think chatbots are going to kind of melt away, and we're going to have companions, right, that engage with brands on our behalf and even act as a mirror for what we want and what we desire. And so we're starting to see this is the new baby step towards a fully autonomous, intelligent, ambient universe. It's going to be crazy and look nothing like we've ever seen.
You just reminded me of the second episode of Black Mirror.
I know.
We get that a lot.
It was I'm fascinated with that program for multiple reasons. But you reminded me of something. I was at the Recode conference when Elon Musk talked, and it was like listening to Einstein meets Leonardo da Vinci, the subject matter that was being covered. But one of the things that he was talking about is, are we already in a game of reality, or is this really life? And it was bizarre to have that postulated, and now you're kind of talking about the fact that I'm going to have someone that's going to represent me, out in the ether.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're
How
talking.
far away is that?
Well,
Is it now, or is it a decade?
Well, it matters if we're in a real world or a virtual reality
This
world,
is true.
like I said.
Nathan, do you have anything to add? Because I know you have some ideas on this.
So my biggest point to coming from advertising myself in the past, like one of the oldest adages with advertising is you don't know advertising is advertising if it's great advertising. As we continue on this path, advertising is just going to become more and more, just a great experience.
So we're talking about advertising. We're talking about chatbots. Obviously, a lot of people have ad blockers now. Do you think there's going to be ad blockers in chatbots?
I think there's going to be a feedback loop that helps people construct their own experience. And the reason why ad blockers exist now is because they provide really a bad experience. They provide prevention of a bad experience. And in the future, the more you can engage and create models and manipulate those models to provide a better life, ultimately, we'll see that melt away. We'll see that just disappear because there's no longer a bad experience. There's only good experience.
Now, I know that Shane has some burning questions that he wants to ask. Shane, do you want to do the asking?
Sure. So this is just some fun stuff that we wanted to start integrating into our podcast here, and it's called Finish the Sentence. So I'm going to go ahead and start a sentence. You guys know the rest. Fill in the blank as you see fit. There's no wrong answer. So I'll start this one off. I love to see advertising that
Is super targeted.
That's great.
I love advertising that doesn't suck.
Perfect. All right. Well, kind of segueing into that, I really hate to see advertising that
Sucks.
Not sucks, but that stalks me when I'm not interested. It doesn't know who I am, but it's like the bad stalker who won't stop calling me.
Boy, there's nothing worse than buying a product from an ad and then being retargeted with those same ads, and it's like, who is running this program?
For
Because you
30
are
days.
wasting your money and my time.
Right. I mean, that might require like a tighter integration with the company itself and its advertising. Right?
Yeah,
To know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. If I could partner with any brand, if Radbots could partner with any brand, it would be.
Honestly, we're not excited to partner with brands as much as people and developers and just everyone. We see Radbots as a platform that can work for every single person who has something they want to build and grow. We want the world to use Radbots.
And I'd say like what gets me really excited are brands that want to embrace the future and really are passionate about the people that are experiencing them. You know, any brand that wants to integrate with what we're building and kind of sees this vision of this autonomous future, then yeah, I'm super stoked.
Do any brands come to mind that might fit that model either now or in the future?
It's easy. I think these are just easy targets. Like Tesla would be huge because they're so you know, they have such a great vision.
All right, great. So moving on here, if I could have dinner with anyone, it would be
Claude E. Shannon, the father of information theory, because I'm a big nerd. Norbert Weiner, who is the father of cybernetics, because again, I'm a big nerd.
great. Nate?
I like having dinner with Dan. That's always fun.
We make chicken together.
Okay, that was weird.
And ramen.
You guys really must be startup then.
Yeah, that's a startup garage story.
This is
right
a
there.
startup dinner.
And then besides that, maybe Stan Lee.
Ooh, good one.
That's amazing for nerds and not nerds.
That's actually how we bonded. We met over a Facebook group because I was like dying to get design work, and he was like, "I love what you're doing. Let's collaborate." And it turned out we were both comic book nerds. Ultimately, I walked into his place and he had a comic book on the wall, and I was like, "Oh, this is my co-founder." All right, yeah.
What's your favorite comic book series?
I like Nick Fury, any of his stuff from like the 60s, like very spy-esque, like weird, crazy on LSD type comic series.
Mine would have to be, you know, anything Todd McFarlane touches, it doesn't matter. He's like gold to me. So his old Spider-Man stuff, you know, Spawn when he went over to Image, and hopefully this resonates with the audience here.
Absolutely.
You know, ironically, my cousin and I had 1,000 comic books when we were growing up and going to our cottage up North Michigan. And I think for me it was Ripley's Believe It or Not. Those are
yeah.
always...
And I just want to jump in and say that my favorite comic book series is called Sex Criminals.
What issue of Spider-Man was that? Is that an arc?
It's by Image Comics.
Oh, I love Image Comics.
I think I know that series. It's just interesting.
What's it about?
It's basically about people who stop time when they climaxed. So they decide to
age-old
start.
story,
They decide to start robbing banks.
as you would. Like
Good
a
reads.
huge one for me growing up was I would go to this half-price bookstore and they would just have like 25-cent comics. Like they didn't care. People would just donate them. And there were a lot of old like 60s, 70s horror comics that I just got into. And you know, they don't really do that today, but back then it was just like, oh, these are like Tales from the Crypt and like really awesome stuff, right? Like, yeah.
That's
huge
amazing.
part.
What about if you guys were to take Radbots and start talking to DC Comics and Marvel?
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, that would be a brand I would love to engage with.
All right.
Yeah.
One final question on the comic book stuff, because I think this is actually really interesting and fun. So give me your most prized comic book.
I had the Incredible Hulk 181, which is the first appearance of Wolverine, and it was donated by a neighbor of mine who also donated an early, I think it was Superman number 48 or something, but early enough where a little kid me was like, oh, yellowed pages, like totally Indiana Jones comic book, right? Like, yeah.
Mine would be my first issue of Ninja Turtles that I bought, which was just awesome to me. That discovering from being a kid that Ninja Turtles was actually a comic book, and that there was actually a lot of violence in the Ninja Turtle comic books, which led to more.
Yeah, was that PG?
I'm talking about the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic book, where blood, violence, craziness. It was just very, very cool, and I still have that comic. It's fantastic.
It's a little bit behind the days of Vanilla Ice and TMNT too, right?
Go Ninja, go.
Great. All right. So just to kind of steer it back a little bit towards, a topic of conversation, but still keep it light as we kind of think about wrapping it up a little bit. Give me 3 people that you admire in Silicon Valley.
Is that different than having dinner with? You don't have to admire.
You don't have to have dinner with them. You just really admire what they're doing in the Valley from, maybe a tech perspective or a business growth perspective or just being innovative.
I'd say for me, it's a kind of a theme of people, and it's everyone out there that are trying to really make something from nothing and really believing in their own personal vision to build the future, to build something that at one point people called them crazy for, or, had the wherewithal to really stick to their guns and make something. That's like who I admire in the Valley, ultimately, whether they're successful or not.
Kind of on the same point, I like people that or I really admire people that are focusing on solving some of the bigger problems, because each small problem that's fixed, leads us into the future. A lot of people will say someone like Elon Musk is like changing the world, but it's really, the people working with Elon Musk. It's the people before Elon Musk that are making things like that possible.
Giving it a little bit of thought now, there's a lot of people who did a lot of great work that led us to this point. And they're kind of the unsung heroes. And they started the big brands and they started the big movements back when there was no tech. They were the people that set the pace and that set the themes that we get to kind of enjoy the fruit of today. And a lot of that, I'm trying to go out and experience. There's Howard Rheingold, who wrote several awesome books on predicting the future and was a part of building the future. There was Fabrice Florin, who did a lot to get kind of the early culture from computer programmers in the 80s and 90s seen. And, there's just a lot of people out there that worked without immediate knowledge of benefit, right? So they paid into it not expecting much in return. I just think that those people are amazing, and I want to say thanks.
Cool. Well, I think this has been a really great podcast, very informative. You guys have been amazing guests. We really appreciate you guys coming by. If any, brand or advertisers want to get a hold of you, what's the best way they can reach you? I mean, we gave your Twitter handles out, but
You can either reach us at dan@radbots.com or nathan@radbots.com, or just come to the site or just stalk us on any social channel. We're very, very friendly people.
And always online.
and feel free to bring up comic books.
Yes. And bring comic books to any meeting. We'll just hang out.
And if you want to get in touch with us at Spark, tweet us at SparkPR. I want to know from the listeners, have you used a chatbot? What was your experience? And what would you like to see in the future for chatbots and ads? Let me know at SparkPR. Thanks, everybody.
Go and see the bottom line rise. Spark, we do it right.